Okay. Hello, everybody. They told me I have to use this microphone because we're live streaming, so I'd rather just yell. Thank you so much for coming by. I recognize a lot of these faces out here, and I've been looking forward to this. I was telling someone yesterday that I don't come for your benefit. I come for my benefit. I come selfishly because my juices get flowing when I look at your eyes and think about what's ahead for all of you in your future in this crazy and getting crazier business that a lot of us have chosen. So this is the art of storytelling. It's more a craft than an art. You know, when I think of an art, I think of like divine inspiration. I call it a craft because in any craft, there are tools that you can use. There are tricks of the trade that you can use to your advantage. There are things that you can do to train yourself to get good at these things. When I was a senior in college here at WSU, a guy named Carl Click, who graduated the year before me, came to visit, and he showed some stories. He got a job right out of college at KGW in Portland, and this guy was amazing. And he came to visit, and he showed some of his stories, and I was blown away by what he did. And I thought, I will never be able to do that. I was insanely jealous. And jealousy, as it turns out, has been a motivating force for me in my career. I'm insanely jealous. I rarely watch other people's stories because I just get jealous. And I think, why didn't I think of that? Or, oh, I could have done that. Or I should have done that. Or that's better than I could have done. But you have to know yourself, and you find that inspiration where you can find it. Michael Jordan, you remember Michael Jordan? He used to cut out newspaper clippings that criticized him, and he would pin them up to remind himself that he had work to do. So I want to talk to you a little bit about storytelling, and I got great news. How many of you want to be or are in some form of storytelling as a goal or a profession? I think that's what we're here for, right? And I want to tell you now, you are so lucky because storytelling is a hot commodity right now. It's been going on since cavemen and women were sitting around fires grunting at each other. But now all of a sudden it's become a hot commodity. I'm a storyteller, people say. And that's great. You can use this craft once you hone it in so many ways. There's podcasts, there's blogs, there's television news, there's movies, the storytelling is incredibly important. Every great commercial now, they're not just blasting you with information. The good ones are telling you a story, and that's because we've become more sophisticated listeners or non-listeners. It takes something special to grab our attention. It takes some craft, and that's why even in a 30-second commercial, there will be an arc of a story. There will be some information at the beginning that makes you care about the person involved in the story, and this is in 30 seconds. There will be an arc of emotion that makes you feel something, and then there will be a conclusion, which is that you should drink Coca-Cola or whatever it is. And what I want you to do as we look at some of these stories is think about the craft of it. Don't be sucked in just by the magic of it. Think about how it happened. When did I feel something? How did he lead me down that path? When did I feel it? How did he set it up ahead of time to make me feel it when I did? So I'm going to show you a piece right now that we did about a month ago. And I thought for me, it was one of the most, I guess, exciting and exhilarating stories I've ever done because it was so challenging. I had this list of information. I had these interviews that we did. I had this path of the story, and I couldn't figure out how to tell it. I could tell it to you in person right now, and you'd say, wow. But I couldn't figure out how to do it in the television medium. When we're done watching this, I want to break it down. And so I want you to watch it as a journalist, watch it as a storyteller, as well as watching it as a human being. So I want you to feel what you would normally feel, but I want you to be paying attention to how this is laid out for you so that we can discuss it afterwards, okay? It's called The Miracle at Meeker. It aired about a month ago, and here you go. Let's take a look.
He was born in New York City, lived in Whitewater, Wisconsin, and Greeley, Colorado. Life's twists and turns eventually landed him in Puyallup, Washington. And on November 17th, he found himself standing on a stage at Meeker Elementary School for a Veterans Day assembly, about to speak. He was there as a replacement for the person who'd been scheduled to talk. She was born in Greenville, South Carolina, lived in St. Joseph's, Missouri, and Spokane, Washington. Life's twists and turns eventually landed her in Puyallup, Washington. And on November 17th, she found herself in the audience at Meeker Elementary School for a Veterans Day assembly, about to listen to a speaker. She'd been called in as a substitute teacher for the woman who normally teaches. The odds of the two of them being together in that city, in that room, on that day, boggle the mind. James Clinton served in the Air Force, first the Korean War, then the Vietnam War. And something happened in 1964 that helped shape his life. And on this day, at Meeker Elementary, he decided to talk about it to the children gathered before him.
And just let flow whatever came up. And I had to mention the close call, so I did. And that was the close call in my life in the Air Force. So I mentioned Bermuda and the switch.
The switch, a decision made a lifetime ago that completely altered the arcs of two entire families. He was stationed in Bermuda, Kindley Air Force Base. He had a buddy named Martin Nisker. That's Martin entertaining James's children at a birthday party at his home.
And at times we had him over to our house because he was there by himself, separated from his family.
Martin Nisker's family was finally moving to Bermuda in mid-June, and he wanted to show them around the island the day they arrived. But on that same day, he was scheduled to be navigator on a flight to Atlanta. So he asked his friend James Clinton for a swap, and James agreed.
I would take the flight that was going to Atlanta, and he would take the flight that was on this special drill.
So Martin Nisker showed his young family around Bermuda and moved them into their new home, and they were happy. In return, a couple of weeks later, on June 29th, he took the training mission off the coast of Bermuda that James Clinton was supposed to be on. They took off at 11:05.
In two such Air Force planes, medical teams set off over the Atlantic to practice parachute rescue in preparation for the two-man Gemini space program. But 2 miles off the southern coast of Bermuda, the transport's wingtips touch. The planes burst into flames and plunge into the sea. Of the 24 people aboard, 7 are rescued, 17 are killed. And within 24 hours...
One of the men killed that day was Martin Nisker.
I'm familiar with death, and I'm not terribly impressed with it.
53 years later, on that day at Meeker Elementary School, as James told the story about the crash, Kim Zeiger, the substitute teacher called into work that day, listened on. And when he had finished, Kim's heart pounded, and she waited in the gymnasium to speak to James.
The first thing I said to him when I went up was, "Hello, Mr. Clinton. Nice job on your speech. Was the date of that collision where you changed jobs, was that June 29th, 1964? And he looked at me like, yeah. Like, how'd you know it? Because he didn't say it in his report. And I said, who was the man that you took his spot? And then he said, Martin Nisker. That's my dad.
And then she said, that was my father.
Fleeting images stolen from the loosely guarded vault of time and faded memory. A little girl in an open field with her mother, a father and a grandmother and a little boy, and the old field is a cemetery. And for a moment in time, anything is possible for a young family launching itself into the world. Kim Zeiger was a daddy's girl.
You know, could hardly wait till he got home. And then he'd come in with his duffel bag, and then he'd empty the bag, and he'd put us in his duffel bag and swing us back and forth. You know, I mean, this is midnight, and my mom would say, "Time to go to bed, kids." But we just loved getting to see my dad.
Kim was 8 years old when the family joined Martin in Bermuda. She was there when her dad showed the family around. They'd only been there a couple of weeks when the crash happened.
And my mom said, "Something's happened." And she turned on the radio. And she didn't usually turn on the radio, but she turned it on to hear the news. And she started crying. And she heard about the collision. And I said, "No, that's not Dad. That can't be Dad's plane." She said, "I think it is." And then pretty soon, a car drove up in front of the house, and a man and a lady in their uniforms got out, started walking up the sidewalk, and I don't think my mom wanted him to come in the house, but you know, they said that my dad had been killed.
After that, the family moved away from Bermuda to begin life without their father, their husband, their champion.
It was a nightmare. It was just an awful nightmare. And then,
Kim had substituted at Meeker Elementary for 20 years. She'd passed a woman named Shirley in the hallways hundreds of times, never knowing that Shirley was married to a man named James Clinton. And that day, after the assembly, they stood there for a time, astounded.
And I was shocked. I couldn't speak. I experienced guilt. I said, "Yeah, I'm here because your father traded places with me." What could I say?
Kim's family hadn't known there was a switch, that there was another man who was alive because Martin Nisker died.
well, it's mixed feelings. It brings up all my feelings about my dad still. You know, I have such a deep love for him, and I miss him. But yet, there's joy in knowing that James and his wife have led such a wonderful life.
That they would be in that room on that day at that moment, 53 years later, is almost impossible to fathom. They get together on occasion now. There are children and grandchildren. And Virginia, Kim's mom and Martin's wife, shows up. She's 95 now. Together, they marvel at the cruelty of fate and the healing power of time.
It is an honor to toast the memory of Major Martin Nisker, loving husband and father, gentleman, and career Air Force navigator. Here's to Marty.
And all of them are now changed forever by the miracle at Meeker.
All right, so thanks. That's a long story by television standards. My former general manager, Dick Warsinski, somewhere in here is probably biting his tongue. Too long. I'm here to tell you that story was a pain in the ass to put together. And who can tell me why it would be difficult, more difficult than most stories? Any ideas? Yes. We did recreate the assembly. We didn't recreate it. I wanted the imagery. I thought it would be cheesy if we tried to recreate it with him giving the same speech. I just thought that would take you to a place where it wouldn't work. I wanted just the imagery of him looking out at those kids and her looking at him. And we showed that imagery several times. I think we would have crossed a line had we, asked him to redo his speech. As it was, we went to a morning assembly at that school. We had 2 photographers. Just to give you a background of the hell we went through to set this up. They told me I had 3 minutes, that we could keep these kids quiet for about 3 minutes. and then all hell would break loose. So we have one camera behind her, one camera behind him. I gave the kids a speech and said, listen, if you make a face or raise your hand or make any motion, you will not be on TV, but you will be on TV if, so anyway, that worked out okay. So we had 3 minutes. We got all the shots we needed, and we were done. We got the shot in the hallway with the two people passing. Okay, so that was a major thing. What video are we going to use, right? There's this amazing thing that happened, but so what I do is I make a list of what elements I have, and one of the elements is what happened in that room, and I needed somehow to do that, and we went through the school, and that worked out great. Why else was it a difficult story to tell?
Because so much of it takes place in the past that you're trying to find the past footage, and you can't, exactly film that now.
Right, right. I could get in trouble for saying this. YouTube is amazing, and I liberally steal from YouTube. And if you ever quote me on this, I will deny it to my dying breath. I went on YouTube after I heard about this amazing story, and I typed in Air Force crash, 1962 or whatever year it was, Bermuda. Up came that video that you saw. That was the actual crash, the planes fluttering to the ground. We then went through the process of licensing that video, and Como was kind enough to pay, I think, $1,000 for us to license that video. That was huge, because what did that allow me not to do? I didn't have to describe the crash. I didn't have to say, and then the two planes collided and 27 men fell to their death. I didn't have to do that, which was a huge relief. What else was difficult? Yes. Exactly. And I can tell you, this interview with Kim, the woman, she had some fantastic sound where she was describing what it was like listening to his speech. And he was in the Air Force, so was my dad. He was in Bermuda, so was my dad. I wonder if he knew my dad. What? I had some amazing sound bites that I had to not use because I was protecting that moment when she has that amazing soundbite where she says, and that was my dad, right? That was the moment of the story. The whole story is building up to that moment, and then it builds down from that moment. That's unless I'm reading it wrong, is that the moment that you felt something that you're like, holy crap? I had to protect that moment for the entire story up to that point. And I'll give you an example. The maps at the beginning where they have lived in their life, I couldn't say that she had been in Bermuda. Because if I would have said she was in Bermuda as a viewer, you're going, oh, she was in Bermuda. Hold it, he was in Bermuda. Oh, I wonder if that was her dad. And I had to do everything I could to not have you think that up until that moment. Why did I do the maps? Why did I show the maps? Any ideas? Yes. Right. When I first heard the story, I thought, oh, they must have both been from Puyallup and then went into the Air Force with her dad and this guy, and then they came back home, which would still be an amazing story, but not as amazing as the fact that they were from all these different parts of the country and somehow ended up in Puyallup, of all places, right? That's the amazing part of the story. So that's what the maps were for. And I struggled with that. How do I build this? How do I make people understand how amazing it is that they're even in the same room, right? And then that's what the story is built on. So what do we use? What are the tools we have to work with when we tell a story? Just in broad terms. We have our writing, right? What else? Music. So sometimes there was music in the story and sometimes there wasn't. I love using music. I use music when I write. Whatever I'm writing about, I put on headphones with the tone that I'm shooting for, if that sounds weird, and then that helps me get into that place. So sometimes there was music, but when I started talking about James Clinton's life and the Air Force and the moment that led up that had an impact on his life, we didn't have the music. That was more of an informational thing. Then when it starts getting to the nitty gritty, I want something building up underneath to help the viewer along a little bit. It can be overdone, and I hope we didn't on this one. How do we make people care about our characters? What did we do in that story to make you care about these people?
You showed their enthusiasm and emotion when telling the story
From their perspective, and you felt when you heard her talk, you were like, oh, you wanted to hug her, right? How about that home video, that old film we found? Like, you know, technically we didn't have to do that, but I feel like to see someone as a child, to see them with their parents, to see them when they're young and innocent, that somehow that gives you a window into who they are. There was one of the sound bites. Oh, the duffel bag. Okay? Nothing to do with the story. So why did I put that in? Where the dad would come home and swing him between the duffel bag. Yes. The bond between the father. It's such a human thing, right? You could see a dad swinging a duffel bag with his little girl. It's very human. We can all relate to that. I thought it was important to put that in there just because it makes me care a little bit. It gives me some common ground with it. My dad used to do blank, used to do this. It was kind of like that, right? It's that relationship. Yes? Yeah. That's a weird thing, isn't it? Isn't that a weird thing? We had them at the beginning of the story, eye to eye, looking into the camera. And then that detachment when they turn around. So it's kind of a weird thing of like, it's reality, but it's not reality. It's a recreation, but it's not a recreation. Mostly it's symbolic, and it takes you there. And anyway, but the other hardest thing was the chronology of that piece, which was it had to be his story and then her story. So after we realized that that's her dad, now we go back to Bermuda. We've already talked about that he was going to give his kids a tour, but now we go back to it, and she was there, and now we move forward that way. So it's his story, her story, and then their story at the end, and then the little meeting at the end, right? The little so at the very end we have something. This was an 8-minute story. At the very end, for the last 30 seconds, there was something you haven't seen, a little surprise to keep for the end. Oh my God, the mom is still alive. You know, they're all together having a toast. It's that little extra punch right at the end. I always try to save a little punch at the end. You think you know what you think you know, you've seen it, all right, I get it, and then wham, a left hook right to the chops, you know, at the very end. So that's what I'd like to try to leave you to. How many of you done the backpack journalism? 1, 2, 3. What a great experience, and you're to be congratulated on that. I want you to look at storytelling, though, in this way. There are stories everywhere. I am here to tell you there are as many stories on the Palouse as there are in Cuba, if you know what you're looking for. If you observe life with an eye for detail and an eye for storytelling, if you are careful about observing life, you will find stories everywhere. And that's going to be your job. When you get thrown out there, your job is going to be in Missoula, Montana, find a story. And you got to find a story. This next one is called Sweeper. It's the third one down. Shannon? Take a look at this.
There is an intersection on a busy street, 125th and Aurora. There is a body shop there, a 76 station with a food mart, a Krispy Kreme, and the 125th Street Grill. And they all have one thing in common. Their parking lots are impeccably clean.
He's a very gentle soul, I would say. He sweeps up, he picks up every last little cigarette butt, everything.
I think so. Maybe he'd like to help the community.
Comes in, sweeps the area, walks away, and is our sweeping angel.
A sweeping angel. They will tell you here of a little man with a broom who comes and goes like the wind, A man who appears and cleans at odd times, asking nothing in return, and then vanishes like a ghost. After a windstorm, look at the lot he didn't sweep compared to the one he did. A sweeping angel indeed. We came to see this man, and from a distance there he was, in the rain at 7 a.m., stooping every couple of steps to pick up bits of muck in his path. And then across the way at the 76 station, he picked up the larger garbage and grime that is dropped by the careless and the indifferent. And then he was gone. We came back another day and we saw him riding his bicycle, but he said he couldn't stop to talk. And then one morning we saw him one more time, and this time he said he'd be happy to tell us his story. First of all, you're sweeping.
Yeah, I clean up all the garbage out here
Why do you do that?
because I don't like the look of it when I come home. Oh, I don't know when to take care of it. That's right. Yeah, so I look at myself in the mirror going, I'm the one who's got to take care of it.
He's the one who has to take care of it. His name is Kent Franklin. He is shy and gentle and private. And maybe you wouldn't guess it at first glance, but he takes pride in where he lives. So why this place? Why this neighborhood?
Because I live 2.5 blocks down. I walk up here all the time, so I see it. So I go, I can do something about this.
And something wonderful has happened at the intersection of 125th and Aurora. The businesses that Kent takes care of each take care of him in their own way. At the 76 station, Raza Owais, the manager, says coffee and snacks are free for Kent.
We just like to, if he help us, and then we like to help him.
John Matthew at Original Auto Body slips him $20 now and then.
We always look out for him. I try to take care of him.
At Krispy Kreme, donuts are on the house. And at the grill where he takes shelter from the rain, Amit Sethi slips him some cash here and there for a job well done.
He's not begging for money. He comes, do the work, and he deserves it, and we try to help him.
Life hasn't been easy for Kent. He was in a bad car accident, and back in time, he spent part of his life in prison for drugs, cocaine and pot.
That's one reason why I clean, because I'm clean. Because I used to be pretty dirty.
To watch him work, picking up every speck, attacking every crack in the cement, is to behold one man's brand of quiet, ragged dignity, a sweeping angel's gift. He shows up and serves humbly, and then he is gone, like an apparition. He asks nothing in return. But what's in it for Kent? What does he want? Maybe it's some form of atonement, a redemption of sorts. Maybe he just likes things to be clean. But maybe Kent Franklin just wants the same things we all want, to be of value, to belong, to carve out his place in a cold, unforgiving world. Maybe it just feels good to be an angel.
I'll bet you have some of those around here, and I'll bet you there's some in Missoula, and I'll bet you there's some in every town and every city and every community in this country, if you know what you're looking for. That came to me. Someone sent a note to Como and said, there's this guy at the intersection, and he just sweeps up, and I think it's so nice that he cares. So we went to meet him, and as you saw in the story, he's very shy. We went 4 times. 4 days of getting up at 6 and being there at 7 to try to get him to even talk to us, and he wasn't ready. And so we kept trying. It just felt like there was something there. What are the things about him that made you feel something about him? Yeah.
His need for dignity and to feel to be like a contributing member of
Yeah.
society despite the past.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? This little guy, again, the whole story is a mystery. Why? What was his past? What's he doing? Why does he do it every day? Doesn't ask anything in return. His limp, right? I didn't explain that. It would have been too much detail. He got hit by a car at some point. But that image of him limping along, yes.
I would say the line where he says, I clean because I'm clean, I think is very
Yeah.
substantial to the video.
I used to be dirty, and now I'm clean. So what more needs to be said? You could go into all these sordid details about his past and what happened and what didn't happen in his life. The fact that he recognizes that's all that needs to be said. What was the longest shot in the whole piece? Anyone? Yes. Yeah. I was struck by that. And it reminded me of Charlie Chaplin, right? With the umbrella, walking along. And so I wrote that whole last bit just so that I could show that whole long shot. So I wasn't wallpapering my writing. I was writing so that I could show that shot and have that full effect of him going down the road, and then up comes the umbrella. Yes, John. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's a guy named Doug Pigsley who shoots all my stories, and he's the best. And Como's been great enough to, I said, if we're going to do these, I want the best shooter, and I need him 3 days a week. So 3 days a week, he's my guy. And so Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we were there waiting to meet the sweeper. But he knows what I want, and I know what he's great at, and we have an understanding together. And he knows, and I'll tell you something very important. He knows that I'm going to watch every shot he shoots, that I'm going to write down every single shot he gets. And by him knowing that, he goes the extra yard. He waits the extra few seconds on that shot because he knows I'm going to look at it. Sometimes we're in a hurry, we're jamming, we got to be on the 4 o'clock show, and it's already 2 o'clock, and I'm slapping together a minute 30 story, and okay, I get it. There's not enough time to watch every single shot. You're just trying to survive and get a story on the air. But a story like this, I owe it to him to watch every single frame that he shoots, and then that makes him better, and it makes me better as well. Any other thoughts on that story? Anything that you noticed that we did to trigger your feelings, to make you understand him? Yes.
You really didn't use a lot of his dialogue. It made him seem a little bit more mysterious.
Yeah.
And really played up how soft-spoken.
Absolutely. So many of our stories, we get so excited about sound bites, and I feel like I'm telling the story. I'm going to use sound bites to help my storytelling, but I'm not going to wrap my storytelling around the sound bites, right? This was a mystery story. What did we not see the first minute of this piece? What did we not see? His face. How come? It just builds a mystery. Who is this guy? What's going on in his head? Yes.
I really like the shot of him. There was something like kind of stuck on the ground.
He couldn't get it up.
And I like that because it showed how dedicated
Yeah.
he was going to leave you in that one piece even when it was tough to get out.
So we went, it wasn't until the third day that we got the shot of the place that he didn't sweep pull back to the place that he did sweep, because it's hard to illustrate how amazing this guy's work is if you don't compare it to something. So that took forever. Yes, sir.
Yeah, the level of mystery towards the project was really great. My favorite part was at the end when you were kind of doing your like monologue towards him walking at the end. I really liked how you basically gave all these different reasons of why he's doing this, but never quite pinning to one specific.
Right.
Thing. And that not only builds the suspense, but kind of just also adds to the level of how great of a person this is.
It makes him more universal, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah. I used a phrase, his form of quiet, ragged dignity, right? To me, that was the best line in the whole piece. You could, if you had to sum the man up in 3 words, quiet, ragged dignity would probably be as good as any. So always search for words that wouldn't normally be used to describe a borderline homeless ex-drug addict who's picking up garbage on the ground, right? There's other ways of saying it. So anyway, and the other thing is, I want to show you a story. How many of you have seen the Wild Horses Monument on the way to Spokane? You've seen that, right? I mean, I've driven past it 1,000 times, and every single time we look up, and my kids and I look up. And so I thought, Why did they do that? Who did it? What's it for? And I found out this amazing thing when we went to do a story about the Wild Horses Monument. This was just the idea of this story was basically nothing more than, I love that thing, let's do a story on it. But when you start digging, you find fascinating things. So this is the story about the Wild Horse Monument.
If you were to head east on I-90 on a bright summer day, shortly after crossing the mighty Columbia, if you were to look up and to the right at exactly the right instant, you would see it. And for a fleeting moment, as your eye caught the image, you would be transported to an untamed time that lives in the recesses of our collective imagination. Wild Mustangs bucking and stomping and galloping free and loose atop a naked ridge, above a river, on top of the world. There is a steady stream of visitors, a kind of summer pilgrimage. They climb a steep trail to get there.
Well, I wasn't sure if there was even a path to get up here, but she knew that there was, so we decided to stop and come check them out.
Me and my family was driving through here and we saw these horses, I think. Thought, hey, how about look at them?
There was a small herd of them up there, under the hot sun, forged from half-inch plates of steel. The lead stallion runs high above the river. The rest of them follow, hooves pounding on the dirt, nostrils flaring, manes blowing in the wind. One of the people who shows up to admire the wild horses pulls a steel basket out of his car. Oof. He holds it up to the horses like he's making some kind of offering. And then he starts walking up the trail.
Oh, yeah.
Like everyone else, Dave Govader wants to get closer to the magnificent creatures on the ridge. He's been here before.
I pulled into this site here, and I knew that Washington was having its centennial in 1989. And I looked up there and I thought, this is wild horse country.
He pulls out a can of paint and begins covering graffiti. And somewhere along the way, he remembers. Dave is the creator of the wild horses. They came galloping out of his imagination. And in 1991, he cut them out and assembled them first on his ranch in Chewelah, north of Spokane, and then finally at the Columbia Gorge, where they have been frozen in time ever since. Finished with the graffiti, he inspects the Mustangs one by one.
Living steel. Yeah.
The way a father inspects his children before church.
We built our whole culture on horses. You know, much of why America ever happened was because of how the horse helped transform things. The meaning of this piece, the meaning of it was here long before I ever showed up. I happened to see it go by the cosmic window, you know, and as an artist, I reached in and grabbed it off the shelf or out of the fruit basket. I grabbed it.
The imagery of a basket yielding its bounty is a theme for this man. And then he offers a clue.
I have a lifetime that's given to me. However long I live, I have this to be part of my life. And to complete it would be nice. I'm 66.
And there you have it. The Wild Horses Monument was never finished. Its real name is Grandfather Cuts Loose the Ponies, and the giant steel basket that Dave imagined dumping the horses into our world was never constructed.
The basket represents the positive nature of the universe to me. It's the gift of life.
He'd like to see it finished before he is, but the cost is more than he can handle alone. He would need some kind of sponsor, someone with pockets as deep as Dave's imagination. Until that happens, the Wild Horses will continue doing exactly what Dave Govader always dreamed they would do.
Well, just as many people have gone, holy cow, or holy dang, look at them horses running. That to me is all it needs to be, a split second.
It only takes a split second to wake up echoes, to set our dreams loose, running wild and free like the ponies on the ridge, breathing fire, uninhibited, dancing in the moonlight for all time. It is up there waiting, unfinished, as we've learned, it is also perfection.
So we wanted that piece to have a kind of a I wanted to lull you into just a dreamy state, and I hope we did that. We used a kind of an ethereal, dreamy music to kind of lull you into that place. I wanted it to feel timeless. I wanted you to feel something about these horses, the way I've thought about them every time we've driven by them over the years. There's something there, and I think we use the phrase to bring us all to an untamed time that lives in the recesses of our collective consciousness. So now I'm trying to make it a universal thing, that whether you drive past this thing or not, or have ever seen it or not, you have some sort of sense of it, a feel for it. There was the reveal was, of course, that it was never finished, that this guy is growing old, waiting, and this thing has never been finished. I think the most important part of this story was the pictures. I mean, just beautiful pictures. That last shot, and I'm not sure if the lighting in here, if you could tell, but that last shot of the silhouette of the horses in the full moon. So we had to wait for a full moon, and then it was smoggy. There was wildfires, so we had to wait for the next full moon. And then Doug, this camera guy that I was telling you about, he couldn't get the shot. So we were up there. He couldn't get an angle with the moon. It wasn't working. And finally, we packed up. And I had imagined, typical me, here's what I want: the horses in the full moon. So he's trying to make that happen, and he couldn't make it happen. It just couldn't get the right angle. And as we were leaving, approaching our car, there's a parking area down below. We're in the weeds walking. He goes, "Hold it." And he looked up with that eye that he has and goes, "I can get it." And he set up his thing and put his extender on, and then that's the shot. So again, I saved that shot for the very last shot. It's that little punch that I was telling you about. I could have used it earlier. I could have started with that, right, and grabbed your attention. What else was done in that story that gave you some sort of, idea of what goes into this process? Anything? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Who is this guy? What the hell? He's got a steel basket out in the middle of nowhere holding it up to the horses? Right. Yes, sir.
So there's a shot, one of the first shots you get where you're kind of close up there. One of the horses, like not right in the center, but off to the right, has some graffiti on it, and you kind of think, oh man, people go up there and graffiti, and like half a minute later, he's up there
Spraying it off. You noticed it before, and then he was taking care of it. Dick? Yeah, we did. Dick hired me, everybody, at Como Television. He was kind enough to do that. Yeah. Yeah. I mentioned a little bit about this in this forum that we had yesterday, and typical stories on local news are 1:30, preferably 1:20. We're doing some now that are 45 seconds. I have earned that, and here's how I did it. I cheated, I lied, and I would say, yeah, it's 1:30 when really it was 1:36. And then but it had to be a good 1:36. I couldn't have a producer watch that story and go, how long was that? That sucked. And then find out that I had lied about the time. So then 136 became 145. And now I'm doing 2 minute, 30-second stories, but they have to be good. That's your word, not mine, earning it. You have to earn it. And so the problem with that process is if you slip up one time, if you take advantage of all that you've earned by cheating and stealing time and then fail, now they're on to you and they're watching you and the gig is up. So I like to feel that I have just lied and cheated my way to doing 8-minute stories, and it took 25 years. But the great thing about storytelling is there are 45-second stories that are too long. There are 8-minute stories that are too short. We had a Jill Tegman. We had a producer named Jill Tegman. And she said to me, how long is this story going to be? And I said, I don't know. I haven't written it yet. And I said, it'll be as long as it is. And she hated me for that. And she'd tease me about it for years. I said, and I wasn't trying to be flippant or cocky, I just said, it's done when it's done. I sit down and write it, and it's done when it's done. Now, you do not have that luxury, as Dick pointed out, in your first job. But here's something you can do. You can, in your spare time, because most of you, when you get your first job, are going to be single. You don't have kids. You can, in your spare time, take a camera on your day off or after your shift is over and find a sweeping angel and do a story. And you can do it day after day for a week. And there's nobody telling you that it, has to be a certain amount of time or that you have to finish it in an hour. And then you put together this beautiful story. And then you drop it in their lap. And here's the thing about producers. They can be a little lazy sometimes. And so, whereas they would like their stories to be 1:30, if a beautiful story lands in their lap that's 2 minutes, guess what? They're probably going to air it. But it has to be good. And you can do that. Yes, Anna. Yeah. And it varies, that story, it's my writing system is such that my writing, here's what I do. When it's time to write, it might not be there. And I'm clued in enough to my own brain to know when it's not happening. But not just when you're writing, from the... Yes. I think that took us from the inception of the idea of that story. We went up and there was no full moon. We came back the next full moon. That was a 1.5-month process, right? That was a 1.5-month process. Not everybody, gets that luxury of spending 1.5 months. Now, I wasn't working on it full time for 1.5 months, but I'm dabbling with some other stuff. So we collect all the video, and then I sit down and I just start writing. And then if it's not there, I wait. I put on, and then I got this weird thing where it just happens in my brain where it's time to write. And it's all perfect, and it can happen at any time of the day, and I sit down and I put on the right music in my head, and then boom, and I don't think twice about it. I don't go back very much and rewrite it. I pretty much lay it down, and I'll hone some stuff here and there. But these can take a long time, and we've done others in a single day, like we've done some of these longer form stories in a single day if we have to. But it's that time is your enemy and time is your friend. And that's why I would suggest do your thing every day to the best of your ability, but off to the side, shoot for greatness. My career was made, learning how to do these stories for me happened from midnight to 2 o'clock in the morning. So that's after the late show. My wife and kids are home asleep. I got nothing to do. I'm just going to go home and watch TV anyway. So why not stay and be inspired and try to do something awesome? So that's something all of you can do you're going to have access to a camera, to an editing bay, and to your coworkers, and you can do something great. Why the hell not? There are sweeping angels everywhere. I don't. How much time do we have? Are we getting close? I am going to stick around. If any of you want to BS a little bit, I'll just kind of go over here if anyone wants to hang out. But thank you so much. I hope you got something from it. Go out and do something awesome. Thank you. That's a hard question to answer.
I have like